sure to Dan, our guest speaker today, I'm sure he'll give you back some business too as he gets to know you and trusts you. And that's the whole part of our community that we're building at Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays, but also within Top Agent Nation as we're growing it and building it as the leading education platform. So, without further ado, Dan, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and your journey. I'm sure you didn't wake up one day saying, I'm going to be a cost seg expert in this market, but sharing a little bit about your background and then going into what cost seg is.
Absolutely. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Dan Black. I'd like to thank James for asking me to come on today, and it's really a pleasure to be here. No, I didn't start out waking up one day with cost seg on the brain. I I actually started out as a residential realtor. Then I got into banking, and I did commercial real estate financing for 30 years plus. But cost segregation, I discovered in, oh gosh, 2003, and it was relatively new on the horizon. Um, we did a road show in Las Vegas, my partner and I at the time, and talked to 3,000 brokers over a convention weekend. And after talking to those brokers and losing our voices, we realized quickly that nobody knew what it was. Uh, we knew that some of the big hotel players, for instance, in Las Vegas and New York and Chicago, were probably using cost segregation, but we still had to do an enormous amount of education, and we're still doing that today. So just before we dig into the weeds too deeply, I'd like to ask you guys and girls, um, what would you do if you went to the mailbox and opened it and had a bill for $1 million from Uncle Sam? That's got to hurt. That's got to make you gasp just a little bit. I'm going to check and see if I got my nitroglycerin tablets to put under my tongue for my heart situation and so forth. But I got to tell you a true story. Just this is just a kind of a regular routine for us, somewhat. I had a new client pop up just this year. Actually, his commercial real estate broker called me, pretty frantic, out of breath, and he said, uh, "My real estate attorney, our mutual real estate attorney, Joe, told me to give you a call." He said, "I've got a big deal and a big commission riding on a client, and suddenly he doesn't want to close the deal. He's got cold feet. Um, he just got a big tax bill for $1 million from Uncle Sam, and I don't know what to do." And I'm trying to calm it down here a little bit. My next call is from the client's wife, and, and she's wondering what they're going to do. So they got a big tax bill, and it turns out this particular client is quite a hot shot. He's a developer and a commercial real estate investor, and he loves residential and he loves multifamily. And so he buys and he builds and develops. He does it all. And he's only 31 years old. So he's never gotten a bill in the mail like that before. And so I try to put everybody a little bit at ease. I'm like, okay, let's calm down. Let's step back just a little bit and look at the situation. What are we trying to accomplish here? The realtor tells, or the broker rather, tells me that this $1 million tax bill is keeping him from closing the deal. So we have to evaluate what's happened last year and the year before. Turns out this client had just purchased 64 units of multifamily, basically brand new. The developer that built it didn't finish it. My client's name's Josh, stepped in, finished up the fit up, did all the landscaping, got the approvals that weren't accomplished by the first developer. So now suddenly he's got an $11.2 million project. Um, and he really just wasn't thinking about taxes. He's thinking about the property and how he's going to grow his business as a commercial developer. So what we did is I did a quick armchair analysis of this prior deal. And we found right off the cuff, we used our new cost seg wizard, little tool I developed with artificial intelligence, and found that we found $2.4 million in tax savings right off the bat. Um, and that was just, armchair estimate, but pretty darn close, within 3% or so of an accurate number. Keeping in mind, when we do cost segregation, uh, initial estimates, they are just estimates, but they're pretty darn thorough. We've looked at blueprints, we've looked at your appraisal, if we've got one. We've done quite a bit of research. We're going to be pretty darn close. So what happens over the next week or so is we finish the study. We don't take 6 weeks to do studies. We do studies in a week or two, depending on the complexity of the deal. And so when we came back with the final study, we saved $2.8 million. And that's his depreciation. So at a 40% tax bracket, the client ends up saving $1.1 million in taxes. So he's got his $1 million problem solved and $120,000 left over to go work on the next project. So as you can imagine, I'm pretty excited for this client. He's really excited. The broker is super excited because he didn't lose his big commission check, and that makes all the difference. So um, what has happened since that occurred, which is just a few short months ago, is it gave the client more vigor, if you will, and he called up the broker and they found another project. So now they're on to buying approximately 50 brand new townhomes, all at about $325,000 a piece, 100% occupied, that the last developer got in trouble with, and my client's going to come in and buy it. This real estate broker is going to get yet another commission, and that's kind of how it goes. If you look at um, cost segregation, sounds really complex to a lot of people. If you're out there selling, or you've got agents that are selling property every day, they're deep in the weeds with is the project going to work? Does the property work? Does it cash flow? Do we have to do any renovations? And on and on and on. They got to juggle the appraisal and the title work, and any number of things can go wrong, as we all know, right before the closing table. So that's what we're trying to alleviate. So what I tell a lot of real estate brokers is, if you can be the person that speaks to your client and just does a mini introduction, we'll do all the heavy lifting in the background. We'll even white label our cost segregation solution for real estate advisors or real estate brokers or CPAs, financial advisors, and what have you. We'll make it so that you're always the hero. We're the engineers, we're the guys that do all the grunt work in the background. And we really like being those people. We relish that capability of finding money, because when you buy property, um, you've got an automatic depreciation that gets overlooked 90% of the time. And what we do is I kind of think of us like pirates. We've just discovered a chest on the bottom of the ocean, and that's our property every time. And I personally can't wait to open that chest up and see how much gold is inside, because there usually will be some. And it's just a matter of how much. So backing into cost segregation, all we're really doing at the end of the day isn't a bunch of magic. It's just math. And math doesn't lie. So what happens when you buy a property? If you buy a $10 million retail property today, you're going to have depreciation from day one, but it's called straight line depreciation. That's what the government gives you if you're filing taxes. Your straight line depreciation, you're dragging it out for basically 30 years. What we do is we look at the property and we're dissecting in a forensic way all of your wiring, your halogen light bulbs in the ceiling, your floor tile, your ceiling tile, your marble, your brass fixtures, your roofing shingles, your air conditioning units. Just like if you look at an MAI appraisal, cost seg really, in my mind, is like an MAI appraisal on steroids. If we've got an appraisal that the realtor can give us from a prior sale or just market research, photographs, if they've got blueprints on the property, site surveys, all those things are the components that we need. And so once we have all that, we're just going to change the method of accounting from straight line depreciation to accelerated depreciation. And if you've done any 1031 tax exchanges, which is a great little marriage with cost segregation, by the way, if you're going to buy a property and hold it, you know that there's some immense depreciation and tax savings right on the front end of every single property. And so it's really paramount. If you're a real estate broker, agent, what have you, there are 2, 3 ways that you could use a service like ours to really help your business out and help your client out. And I'll just ask you another question. Who do you think the client is going to hear from first about cost segregation? Do you think it's going to be the CPA? The CPA? Usually not. Usually, the CPA is going to be focused on lumping large groups of assets into, for instance, 15-year property. I just looked at a shopping center a couple of days ago, $30 million project, a couple of nice restaurants, some retail shopping and so forth, a little fresh market on the end, really pretty property. Look at the depreciation schedule. The CPAs put the land in 39-year property. Perfect. Everything else, 15-year property. And why is that? Because CPAs are not engineers, and that's what we are. What we're really doing is marrying tax, engineering, and accounting. It makes a great little unit. It works so well. CPAs are not engineers, just like real estate brokers aren't either. You don't pretend to be an appraiser or something that you're not. And so what we try to do in terms of education and working with realtors and brokers and so forth and advisors and CPAs who don't always think about us is that you should really look at your Rolodex, look at your database. You've got clients that you sold property to in the last 5 years or 7 years. I wouldn't go much further than 7 unless they've done a renovation in the last few years. But you can go back 7 years and you look at your client base, you can help those people save a lot of money they didn't even know they had. They've got money in their property, they just haven't extracted it. And they have not changed their method of accounting from an old straight line depreciation method to the new accelerated depreciation method. And that makes all the difference. That changes everything about wealth creation, your ability to grow, your ability to get fantastic terms at your lender's office, the bank, credit union, life insurance company, whoever is financing the deal. So I tell brokers and realtors, look at your prior database. You don't really have to think about the deals you're working on today necessarily, although they're the highest, best and highest opportunity. You can go back 5 years and look at the purchases that your clients made, and you can extract enormous value from that. If you are that guy or girl that goes to your client and says, I think I can help you save more money in taxes and boost your net operating income on 1 or more properties that you own, and we do that work and we discover in a 24 to 48 hours, we can tell you within reason, with about 90% certainty, how much that client's property can save in taxes. So I know it may be a lot to think about, but you become a tremendous value add to that client, a really solid advisor. So let's fast forward just a little bit to today. The big beautiful bill, I don't know how many people have heard about that, but that's new ground this year. and 100% bonus depreciation is available. So that's an enormous step up from last year. It was 60% bonus depreciation last year. So, and it works in a variety of places in business. It works on automobiles that you might buy for your business, where you can write off 100% right off the bat, equipment, cars, trucks, what have you. And it also works on real estate, which is the best product in my mind, the most valuable. So there's something to think about there. If your client bought a property from January 20th of this year, 2025, to now, and here we are approaching Christmas and the New Year, and I got people lining up right now behind us, hurrying to get their taxes done to take advantage of the tax benefit. You can offer that solution to a client and say, any clients that you sold property for this year are going to get that benefit. They're going to get a massive write-off. Going forward, I think, I know, I can't even think of a client that's been disappointed by saving money, except the ones that aren't making money. But you can use this tool. It's a really valuable tool to go to a lender for that client. Or let's say that your client's looking at 3 or 4 different properties, and then you just can't figure out which one's going to deliver the greatest ROI. Well, if you've got the market data on that property, or you happen to have an appraisal from the prior broker that worked on the property, anything that can help us, blueprint, site survey, all of that stuff, again, we can go ahead and give you an armchair type quote estimate. It's about 8 pages. It's pretty detailed. And we can show you this particular property will save your client $500,000 right now. And what do you do with that? Well, you can back it into your financing. You can use that to show what the net operating income will be if they implement cost segregation. Doesn't mean they have to, but the estimate's totally free. They can use the estimate any way they want to. I've had clients take a cost segregation study they just did. Maybe they just did it 2 years ago. They want to sell their property for some other reason. They can give it to the prior or the purchaser that's going to buy that property. They could even raise their price on their property because it's going to give so much value and boost that net operating income on the property going into the deal. The purchaser may not have ever heard of cost segregation. Who knows? But you're giving them something that we can update in-house and put their name on it, and they can use it. So it's kind of like an appraisal. You can kind of pass it around, use it for what it's worth. At a certain point, the value starts to diminish. But it's a really valuable tool that can be used that gives you an enormously powerful position as not just a real estate agent or a broker or just the next CPA. You're an advisor, and you're showing them how to boost their business, grow their business, and do it smartly. So I'll kind of stop right there for just a second. James, anybody here that would have any questions for me?
Does anyone have any questions, or I'll ask some?
I do. How you doing,
Yeah,
James?
go ahead, Masters.
How are
Yeah.
you?
It's Dan. So you mentioned in reference to you said going back, looking at the database for past clients you did business with. Um, but you also mentioned the conversation as far as asking them would they like them to save money on taxes, and then you're saying reducing their operating expenses. And then can you explain that a little bit more? That's where I
Well,
kind of like, yeah.
thanks for the question. You're not necessarily reducing expenses because those are generally, you have constant expenses and then you have variable expenses on any project that'll go up and down, like utilities and so forth, and you have your fixed cost. But from a tax saving standpoint, if your client is making money, when we come in and do our work, we're extracting depreciation. So it ends up being a write-off, if you will, for that client. If a
Okay.
client's are earning, let's say, $300,000 on a property per year, Let me give you an example. I just had a client come to me. It's been 6 months, but he's an old neighborhood friend of mine. He started buying single family homes back in the day when our daughters were playing at our local pool together and hanging out, and we'd sit around and talk about deals all day long and watch the kids play. But anyway, fast forward, the guy started out, he bought house at a time. He ended up with about 20 houses. And then we kind of dissipated. We moved away from each other. He called me up um, fairly recently, and his bank really liked him because they were giving him financing on anything he could touch. And so he bought a car dealership was defunct, but a brand new building. He bought a self-storage facility that wasn't performing very well, had about 70% occupancy. He bought, I don't know how many properties he purchased, but bottom line was he's just like my first example I told you, Josh. He called me up and he had a bill for $1.8 million in taxes, and he wanted to make it go away. So what we did is cost segregation. He had 9 properties he bought in a year. And we ended up, I don't know, well over $2 million in tax savings on all these properties. He didn't have any tax bill when we were done,
Okay.
and he still had, $500,000 left over to go buy more property with. So I hope that answers your question. I know it's maybe a convoluted way of telling you, but you can distribute that that savings over a few years if you want to. If you want to take,
Okay.
let's say we save $1 million for a client on a $10 million property. You can take that $1 million and distribute it with your CPA. You can look at your taxes going forward or going backwards and say, I want to put 200,000 here. I don't want to put 300,000 there. I want to put 200,000 on this year and offset your taxes kind of as you go because it's your
Okay.
money. It's your money at the end of the day. And we're not going to tell you how to spend it, but with your CPA's help, you can really get nitty gritty on this and figure out where to apply those savings.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Dan, I'll just add to this. How much do you need, let's say in real estate or development or CapEx, or what is that client, where's there's the threshold that you should take a look at their portfolio or property?
It's incredibly low. Um, Last year, just on the bottom end of the spectrum, we did, I don't know, I've got a guy that works for me that loves single family homes and Airbnbs, and that's all he does. He doesn't want to do anything else. He really likes the quick jobs. So he did, I don't know, 700 single family homes last year. So you can go, I mean, it really makes sense if you're looking at homes that are priced at 250,
Wow.
250,000 on the low end. We would charge approximately 1,400 bucks to say $2,200 for a single family home rental. Can't be yours, has to be investment property. Um, and it's so easy. They're so easy to do. And if we have, speaking of like the feasibility of cost savings on multiple units, the more we have, the greater the savings. So, like, I love franchise opportunities, for instance. Like, I've got a client that I financed originally 28 McDonald's for a client several years ago. They're all basically the same cookie cutter design, you know? It's like so many franchises out there. So he had a couple of new concepts that we had to break out separately. But for the most part, the footprint was essentially the same. So it saved us an enormous amount of time, money, and energy and engineering. And so then we also do another little cool thing where we use a new technology uh, uh, with drones and artificial intelligence. And our engineers have little keypad notebooks where they can go out to a property. We've been doing this a long time, where they can walk through the property. They can pinpoint corners on property lots. They can show us landscaping. Then they can go into the building and they can identify all the major components because we're going to put couple of hundred photographs in every single cost seg study we do. So when we also have a national site inspection team that'll go anywhere in the country and visit a property. If you got a client in Scottsdale, Arizona, or LA, or Chicago, they can be there in a couple of days, meet your property manager, non-invasive. They take a lot of notes, they take a lot of pictures, and they report back to us, and we pop all that right into our study, so it's all documented. Enormous time savings. So that's how we streamline the process. Our larger competitor firms, they've been talking 4 to 6 weeks on studies, and we're more like, can we do it this week? That's really our attitude on as long as our numbers make sense. We want to move that dial quick. We don't want people. I don't need more Joshes and the other guy Steve where they're just having a panic attack. We want to solve that problem as soon as possible and get it done and get the study off to your CPA so they can quickly do the filings and so forth.
Dan, thank you. And I mean, that's good to know because I always thought there was a threshold. But hearing just an investment property Airbnb, to be honest, I heard this a lot of time. First time, I hear something smaller and dollar amount, and I'd love have you share more, maybe a way we can streamline it to see if everyone has clients here. Because I'm already thinking of one of my clients that have massive portfolio single family. I mean, just tons, and there's a benefit. So go ahead, Dan. If
Sure, sure. What I will tell you, since you brought that up, that's a really good thing to think about. Each property type, generally speaking, has its own little range of depreciation. So as an example, I've got some clients that are AHOA members, Asian Hotel Association, that buy hotels. That's all they do. I've got another group that buys gas stations, C-stores, totally different category. And we also do energy tax savings. We do the 179D tax credits for fuel efficiency and energy efficiency. That's a completely different study, much smaller in terms of cost and so forth. But back to property types. So hotels, I mean, you can do with hotels, we can get up to 40, 50, 60% in depreciation on a hotel, which is massive. If you've got, well, I really don't want to go down the research and development road, but any property, the more complex it is, the more moving parts, medical facilities, for instance, really elaborate hotels and resorts, clinics, those types of properties have enormous amounts of wiring and equipment. Hospitals, if sometimes they're for profit, for instance, they've got so much wiring, which is one of our major components, is the electrical component. Restaurants are really good, depending on the type of restaurant that it is. There's a lot of equipment, there's a lot of wiring in those. Multifamily, self-storage. Self-storage is probably number one. Multifamily is number one or number two. They're just neck and neck in terms of what we can pull out of a property, in terms of depreciation and tax savings. And once you've done one, you'll do everything you got. It's just something you must do. And while I'm on that subject, I might as well talk about, I have clients that and CPAs, I think they generally know the answer to this, but they're like, oh, what if I get audited? And go, number one question, what if I get audited? We never have audits. And why is that? The reason is usually because if you're using straight line depreciation, you're kind of just waving a magic wand over the entire property without breaking anything down. Your CPA is lumped the land in the 39-year property, the 39-year bucket, and he's put the majority of the building into 15-year property. So you're leaving yourself open to a whole lot of interpretation. If somebody wanted to really dig into your client's property and say, wait a minute, these two numbers, these two percentages don't make sense. When we do cost segregation, we're taking a finite approach. We're literally taking every single drywall screw, ceiling tile, floor tile, what have you, and putting it into the appropriate bucket. So it's not just in 27.5 year property anymore, or 39.5 year property anymore. Now we've got 5 year property, which for instance on a hotel would be, let's say, carpeting. Every 5 years or so, hotel owner's going to replace the carpeting. The roof. How long is the roof going to last? 20 years? You know? And I'm always thinking about depreciation. For instance, with the big beautiful bill, when you think about, you go buy a brand new Mercedes. People that don't understand real estate, I use this analogy. So you buy a new Mercedes or a Cadillac or some cool car, right? Okay, how long are your windshield wiper blades going to last? 3 years? Okay, I put that in 5 year property. How about the tires? 3 years, 4 years, maybe tops? If you drive a lot, no, 5 year property. What about the engine block on that beautiful car? 20 years. Okay. It's going into, everything goes in a different bucket. So you got 5 year property, 7 year, 15 year, 27.5 years, and 39 year property. Everything in that property is going to go in one of those buckets. The bucket we want the most is the 5 year bucket. That's what pushes 80% of our depreciation forward, where we can maximize that depreciation. Then there's 7, and then our 15, and so on. So anyway, stop there again. Any more questions as we go along?
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the recapture, the evil other side. If you can talk about that a little bit.
Oh, it is an evil word, Scott. So we try to advise clients, and I get this a lot. I get that question a lot too. Not necessarily, about recapture specifically, but if I do cost segregation today and I sell my property next year, what happens? Okay, and you're exactly right. I will probably tell that client, if the odds are 10 to 1 that you're going to sell it in a year or two, don't do a cost seg study. I wouldn't recommend it. It will tangle you up. It'll complicate your world. It's not that it can't be overcome, but it just creates problems that you really don't want to have to revisit. So if you're going to keep a property 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, most on residential and commercial, most investors keep property 5 to 7 years. Now it really makes sense. And that's where you really want to do it. I tell clients, if you do run into the recapture with a property, let's say there's an emergency, and you need to sell a property real quick and you're going to cash out of it. You're going to have to give some money back to Uncle Sam. Just be prepared for it. You can go ahead and do a cost segregation study, but I'm going to advise you that it's something that you may have to revisit should an emergency pop up, or goals change, or maybe your real estate partners want you to buy them out or something like that. You're going to have recapture, and it is something that you will have to do. Most of the time, it never even raises its head.
Thank you, Scott. Any other questions? Maybe because I know there's some developers here. What is it going on to development projects from maybe start from raw land entitled to the development part? Dan, could you answer that from a
No, I'm sorry.
development?
I thought
Yeah,
you were
sorry.
talking to somebody. Go right. I'm sorry. Can you
No,
answer
I'm just
that?
not catching up because I'll ask questions until everyone thinks about. But let's say on some development, as you said, more complicated is better savings. What about those that you're working with development, and let's say from single family developers to commercial, and then we'll add a twist. What about the modular folks?
Oh my. Well, I mean, as long as it's investment property, and you're making money, you got to be making money. If a client's losing money, they don't really qualify for cost segregation. So you need to have kind of a tax problem before you begin, or you want to minimize your tax basis. You want to eliminate the cost of that business so that you can keep growing your business and multiplying the depreciable assets going forward. So, I mean, it works. It works on single family homes. Multifamily is really big. It's self-storage, as I mentioned. Retail is great. Medical is great. Um, we have clients that have a lot of office product. Now, we'll tell you, and we all read the same headlines and the same reports. Office historically across the country has been declining. And it all kind of began when COVID came around, and none of us liked that situation, but we had so many millions of people go remote. So what happens is office clientele, the office developers and owners, they've had to reevaluate how they make money with their property because suddenly they got a vacancy problem. Uh, doesn't mean that we can't help them, but if office is a primo location, I'll give you another example. I've got a real estate broker with NAI Global that I've been working with for 20 some years. And he called me right before Thanksgiving and sent me an email and said, I bought this beautiful building. It's all glass, um, 6 stories. I looked it up on the tax records, and basically he had gone to an auction. Um, and I love hearing stories like this because it just shows you how astute commercial investors are. But he found out that a wealthy gentleman in our town had died. Uh, they had taken all of his property and put it into a trust, and then the auctioneer got a hold of it and were selling off properties. And this guy had really good taste. One of the properties was the one that my broker friend called me about, and it was $5 million taxable asset, all glass, had a building next door to it. It was identical, and they shared some land in between and parking. It's about, gosh, 100,000 square feet. Had some vacancy, but bottom line, he bought the property at auction for $1.9 million. The tax assessment was $5 million. And I said, what do you want to do with this? And he said, I would love to do cost segregation on it. And so I did a quick estimate. But bottom line, there were a number of different types of doctors in that building. So what I ended up doing was a cost segregation, a quick estimate, didn't convert it into a study yet. He's still thinking about it. But he shared it with a couple of doctors in the building that wanted to buy the building from him and pay him north of $4 million. So he was going to make a really quick $2 million plus on this property just by buying it right. And going back to, different property types, multifamily, 20 to 30%, 40% in some cases, hotel, 30 to 60%, medical, research and development type properties, industrial, manufacturing type properties, really high on those numbers. I mean, as high as 80%, which is really incredible from an appreciation standpoint and enormous savings. So every deal that you have, what I would say is, don't try to figure it out. It's like trying to do an appraisal yourself and you're not an appraiser or a cost segregation person. All we ask for from our potential clients and brokers and so forth is get us an address, get us a closing statement if it's closed so that we can see when it was placed in service. If you got an appraisal, it's really helpful, or just market data. And with that, in 48 hours, we'll have you a really beautiful looking estimate that you can hand to your client, either under your brand or ours, your logo or our logo. It doesn't matter to us at all. And you could show that client something that's so valuable. That client will love you for forever for showing them money they didn't know they had.
Thanks,
So,
Ed. Master, do you have another question?
Yes. What about not the traditional office space, but what about co-working spaces? How reference to cost segregation?
that's a
That's my
really good
question.
question. Yeah, if I used to be in one of those situations for my business years ago, and the tenant, as long as, for instance, that's usually going to be its own LLC within the property itself. Is that kind of where you're headed with this?
In the property, or it could be, a development property. It could be a standalone property. It doesn't have to be like in a Class A type office building, but it could be like a repurposed property. See what I'm
Absolutely.
getting at?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Question that doesn't come up very often, but absolutely. I mean, give you a quickie example on that. The client that I mentioned a moment ago that bought the big mirrored glass building full of doctors' offices. He called me. I've done a number of shopping centers of his own that he owns over the years, and then he called me one day and he said, "Can you do a beach house in Hilton Head Island?"
Mhm.
And I didn't know. I thought this is kind of crazy, but I asked him a few qualifying questions, and this isn't exactly what you're asking, but just to give you an example, sometimes it'll amaze you what qualifies. So this gentleman had bought a $6.5 million home. It's like an MTV home on the beach in Hilton Head. He put in 2 commercial kitchens, a deep marina in the back. He added about $2 million to this property, so it's an $8.5 million beautiful home. And I said, "Do you rent it out?" And he said, "Absolutely." "How many months of the year?" 11. "And the last month is for the family and our friends." And he said, "Yes." And I said, "We can do that deal." So
Okay.
20, I think it was 28%, pushing 30% depreciation on basically, an $8.5 million property is $2 million plus in depreciation, and a 40% tax bracket, $400,000 in taxes he could write off the top. So
Okay.
yeah, I just tell everybody, here's kind of a quick and dirty rule of thumb. And I hate to say this because I go to church. Churches, nonprofits, uh, a lot of hospitals are nonprofits. Those 3 categories generally do not qualify. But everything else you can think of, yes, sir. We'll do a quick look, see if it's got savings or not, tell you how much it's going to be, and you can move from there. Tell your client to go forward or not. It's
Hey,
worth
Dad,
it.
quick
Thank
thing.
you.
Why do nonprofits? Because they just don't pay as much taxes that they don't qualify. Because that's all.
That's basically it, James. It's if you don't pay taxes, you don't really need us. If you're paying taxes, you need us. We want to
It's
minimize.
too, yeah, it's too bad. I was working with all these church and school groups with religious institution, and they are seeing their money go down, right? And then, well, what if we build on them? Because a lot of them are repositioning now churches to be mixed use, right? You have a religious part where you have the church, you have a dining hall where they rent it out, and then they're building housing to help people. What if they redevelop or they partner like affordable housing, or partnering with another group to monetize and make money, but still let the church use their worship facilities, right? They don't use it all the time. What if there another partner is for profit running it? Would that work?
That's a good question. I've got a client that called me from California who owned a property just like you're talking about where I live here in Lexington, Kentucky. And he wanted to do the same thing. He had a tenant that was basically a church, and then he had an art gallery. He was a big artist, collector type person. He wanted to convert this property into some kind of an income producing situation and then use cost segregation to offset it. One of the problems with that one was it's a 501c.
Mm.
Um, and so what we end up doing is kind of playing lawyer just a little bit. We have to dive into the IRS regulations and dive a little deeper on those types of projects to make sure we know what we're talking about. And we may even get a lawyer involved so that we know that we're doing work on the right type of project and not steering the client in the wrong direction. Because we don't want to tell you, hey, you can save, if you just convert this and spend $1 million to do it, and then start earning rental income off of the property, then do cost seg and then find out it's not going to work. We'd rather dig into those details up front and do some discovery before we go down that road. We just want to make sure that because it's so much easier to do for profit. So when clients come to me, I told that particular client, if you had it done and I could see the rent roll and I could see it on your tax return, you're going to need a year under your belt in terms of income and expenses before we can tell you because the first thing I'm going to do when I look at a project, I'd really like to look at the Schedule D on the tax returns and see how it's been categorized. And I'm going to look at the structure of the LLC itself. Is it a 501c, the sub S, C Corp, what have you? So I want to know all those things before I can really do any kind of identification of cost savings. Case by case.
Any other questions? And then I'll kind of, Dan, give you final word and maybe one other question. But any other questions does anyone else have? Max? Nelson. Go ahead, Nelson.
So I've noticed some syndicators promoting that there's 100% bonus depreciation that they can take advantage of as an investor, but they're also generally going to be passive investors. And I know they're, in order to take advantage of some of the tax deductions and credits, you have to be an active investor. But how does that pass through to the passive investors, and what are the limitations on how much they can use?
Yeah, that gets a little bit tricky, Nelson. I've got situations like that. I've got a group. I'll give you an example again. I've got a group of 5 doctors that own a property that they all use for their patients and whatnot. And what they did when they bought the building is they had passive investors help them buy the building. And those investors each split from a pro rata basis their depreciable expense. And so it always comes down to what's the situation. What I discovered on that particular deal, and maybe how it relates to what you're asking, is that it depends on the ownership and it depends on the income level of each individual passive investor. So if
But the passive investor only can take passive income, not active income, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Thank you, Nelson. Any other questions? And I'll give Dan final words. Oh, actually, I'll ask a quick question if there's none other. So Dan, if let's say, what information basically do you need to do this? So if let's say I gave you a setup sheet or an OM, right, an offering memorandum from the brokers, even before anything happens, or maybe a deal that's, let's say our capital markets group is looking at to acquire, could you give a ballpark guesstimate saying, if you guys do this, I can probably save you this and then go deeper? So what basic information minimum could you use to give a guesstimate? And I know some of them are from 30 to 60% on hotels or deals, but maybe you could narrow it down without being perfect with a variance of error to get somebody to say, hey, this makes sense and we should approach it. What basic information could you go on?
I can actually, I've got 11 engineers that work for us. And they're all pretty brilliant guys. But you know what they all start out with is, what's the address?
Mhm.
If I have the address at a minimum, and I'd love to have more. It's funny if clients don't know you, they try to get away with it as minimal as possible. But that will work. If we've got a property, we've got massive databases, and we use some of the same other places that a lot of you do. The Crexys, the LoopNets, the CoStars, or whatever those different websites are. We can dig out information if we don't have a lot. If we just have a property address or something that maybe we dig into tax rolls as well. So we can go in and we can pull out their tax assessment. We can get site plans. We can get photographs. That's really our job. But if you as a potential client, if you've got the market data, or if you have an appraisal of any kind where we can get square footages, if you've got blueprints, that usually applies to newer projects, but a lot of existing property owners have blueprints too. That tells us so much. I can get you an estimate with any of those different items within 48 hours or less. Usually it's in one day. And then at least we have a basis for going forward. We know that we're going to save at least $1 million, and we estimate everything from a low end to a high end. So we're going to know what our minimum savings are. You can tell us, is it 10 to 1 or 30 to 1? I've seen ROIs of 100 to 1 on what, based on what we charge to what the client receives. So it can be massive. I tell everybody, get us an address. It's just that simple. Start there.
Thank you. Go, Chad, do you have a question? I think you're ready.
I just have like a real world scenario. I have a client, he's buying a property for 4 million and he's investing 2 million on top. It's going to be an event center. Current market price for the property in its current condition is about 5 million, but with the 2 million investment, it's going to go up and he's going to generate significant income. It's California as the location. So ballpark, can we talk numbers, like what sort of savings percentage or numbers would we be looking at here with the 2 million? How would we take that off for? Because he's going to be putting that hard money in.
Sure. So we would say 6 million is our basis, correct?
Okay.
All right. What do you know the approximate land surface is?
Yeah.
How many acres?
It's on San Clemente, it's about 0.25 acres.
Oh, that's tiny. Okay.
Yeah, it's tiny. We're using the parking from the city.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna say let's use let's take out 15% for land. Normally I'd say 20, but since it's so small, so that leaves a basis. That leaves our basis at $5.1 million. Okay. Recreational facilities are really big. There's tons of personal property in recreational facilities, outdoor or indoor for that matter. So what I would estimate, just thought this is armchair, I would estimate, since it's largely personal property, I'm going to say 30%. Okay. So 30%
The use is
of
events. So clarify, the use is event center, which is like a banquet hall. Yeah.
Okay, so it'd be like for weddings,
weddings, bar mitzvahs, and so forth.
conferences and whatnot.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, let's back out of that again. So we'll go back to our 5.1 basis. Okay. I would say on a property like that, but it still has 100% personal usage. So would you have equipment in the building? Would you have audio visual?
Yep.
Did you have a lot of lighting, expensive lighting?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, let's just go low. We'll say 20%. 20% is $1,020,000. Okay. So I'm going to assume that your client is in a 37% tax bracket. So times 0.37%. Oops, I lost my numbers. Bear with me a second. $377,400. And I would say that that's going to be pretty darn close to what they can expect on their first year savings. Keep in
Chad,
mind,
you should connect.
I'm definitely going to connect. He's going to be loving this.
And
it's fun to find the money.
Yeah, and see, this is the whole point. And this is where with Renaissance and what we're trying to do with Top Agent Nation is build this funnel. Because as you said, address, P&L, and I would say for agents that are sending referrals, how much do you want to make? We're putting together now with tech and data, each group will know what they can save and what they can do from, as Scott knows, property management, cost seg, capital markets, what's cost of funds, everything and anyone. We're bringing them all to our group because of partnership and friendships that now with the data of sending referrals, they're going to have all this data and information. So more and more deals can be efficient. And who doesn't want to save on taxes, save on property casualty, save on property management? It makes your property more efficient, more profitable. So all these good things happen. But a lot of times, most people do not have every segment to the best of their abilities of all these parts. No one knows everyone, but our group as a collective, we will. And this is the big reason why everyone wants to work with us. But Dan, final words before we close out.
Okay. Well, I wanted to thank everybody again for being here today. I will tell you that going back to my very first example, my friend Josh, the 31-year-old investor, his wife did get their European vacation that you thought they were going to have to offset because of his big tax bill. And the real estate broker got a check from us for $9,000 for sending over an email with the client's name and telephone number on it. And the client just gave us another 50-unit townhouse project that he just purchased for another cost seg study. So it really works. It's not hard. And I just encourage you, the next deal or any of the deals that you've looked at in the last few years for clients that you've closed, introduce the idea or call me, call one of my people, call David, and we'll walk you through how to do it. It's super simple. We just need an address and a client name and number, and we're ready to go. Thanks so much for meeting with us today.
Dan, thank you so much. And please reach out to Dan Black to learn more about cost seg or just run a study with just one number. He can ballpark it just like Chad did. And we look forward to seeing everyone at Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. Every other week will be on education training for new agents to earn. And then the other ones will be on services. Fumi, last question? Go ahead, Fumi.
I wanted to ask, thank you, how you charge, like what's your rate? Like, is it from the savings or is it like a
The IRS
percentage?
will not allow us to charge a percentage. Are you still there?
Yes.
She is.
Okay. So what we do is we have to look at it kind of from a man hours perspective. So we look at it from an engineering man hours perspective. So if we think that we're going to need 10 hours in a project versus 30 hours, we're kind of going to back into it. So we don't want to do, for instance, I was talking about that multifamily client in the beginning of our conversation. I'm doing for him, we did eight plexes for that project. Each building costs about $6,000. If it's a hotel, if every deal is going to be different, but you're going to see fees from anywhere on residential from say $1,400 at the low end for let's say Holiday Inn Expresses, we might be 5,000 or so. For a really elaborate medical clinic, we might be closer to 15. It's all going to vary depending on engineering costs.
And you send one of your engineers to where you said you're in Kentucky, but California, like other state, any state.
Any state in the country, but we have site people that visit any place that we have as a project, so they're easily sent over. I usually absorb that fee to have them go and do a site visit. It usually takes an hour or two tops, depending on the size of the property. It costs us a few $100s to do it, but it's well worth it. If it's not in our backyard, we're going to send some people that know exactly what we're looking for, what kinds of pictures we want to take, what we want to see inside and outside, and then deliver that within 24 hours so that we can put our total study together.
So I'd say, Fumi, connect. Yeah, it's well worthwhile to talk to Dan, give an address, get a guesstimate, and then proceed with an agreement, because if it makes sense, and it seems like with Chad, it does, it's worth the exploration. But just want to thank everyone for being here, and we encourage to invite more people to learn, earn, and use these services so you can, as Chad and Fumi and everyone else, save some money for your clients. And then, boy, they're going to be repeat clients for life. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you
Great
so
week.
guys.
much. Thank
See
you.
Thanks so
everyone
much,
next week.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me rinse that thing. Rinse it out.